The Agenda with Michael Knight on News Radio 560 KPQ and KPQ.com.
11 minutes past 1 o'clock, Friday afternoon. The weekend has begun. Let's meet our very special guest, Jason Rittereiser, candidate for U.S. Congress in the 8th District. Jason, welcome to the show. Nice to have you in the studio.
Michael, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
My pleasure to meet you. You grew up in Ellensburg.
I did.
And your dad was the police chief.
He was.
Now, that's a unique childhood, don't you think?
I'm fortunate to have that childhood. Yes.
Of course you were. And in fact, it affected your adult life, too, because you became in law enforcement.
I did. I became a criminal prosecutor for King County. That's right.
And that's your current position? You're still an attorney at law?
I'm still an attorney. I went to private practice about 5 years ago to become a labor and employment lawyer and fight for workers' rights.
So this life in law, it's been good for you. You like doing the right thing for the right reason.
Yeah, that's right. I think I've built a career focused on my values and focused on fighting on the right side of issues.
This is the first time you run for office, correct?
It is.
It's a daunting project because so many people have to get to know you.
Yeah, that's true. I am fortunate to have worked in the law and represented people, and I think that this is an opportunity to have a bigger impact than just one case at a time.
You must have given it some thought before throwing your hat in the ring. It must have something that rattled around in your frontal cortex for how long?
Oh gosh, I probably had aspirations to run for office since I watched my mother run for the Ellensburg City Council when I was about 8 years old.
Did she like that work?
She did. She was excellent at it, and that was my introduction to elections and campaigning.
Also, you're familiar with something that many individuals never get acquainted with in their whole life, and that is service to their community.
Yeah, that's right. I am fortunate to have grown up the product of two public servants, and that's always been a focus of what I think is the best way to give back.
Now, you're going to have to explain to me something that I can't figure out. I'm the Californian in the room, but I understand that King County, Pierce County, Chelan County, and Kittitas County make up the 8th District. How can that be?
That's right. Well, we have the most unique congressional district in the state, no doubt. It's the only one that crosses the Cascade Mountains, but really, at its core, it's made up of small-town, rural, working-class folks. It's South King County and East Pierce County and Eastern Washington or Central Washington. And it includes my home over on the west side of the mountains now and what really is my true home in Ellensburg and Kittitas County.
How did the 8th District come into being? Was that gerrymandered at some point? Because whoever did it didn't realize. What are these things on the map? Those are mountains. Oh, they don't look very imposing. Just put these 4 counties together.
Yeah, it was redrawn in 2012, and I was probably the only person that was not upset with the redraw because it picked up my hometown.
So that was everything that you wanted.
It was the perfect draw for me.
But as a rookie's sort of a disparaging word, but as a new candidate.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? What is it that's driving you into politics?
Well, look, I think that it is time for the next generation of leaders to step up and take on our greatest challenges. I think one of the greatest challenges for the next generation is going to be to rebuild the middle class in America. And that's something that drives me every single day. It's why I decided to run for Congress, to stand up and fight for people again. We can have a government that is built to benefit big corporations and really, really rich people, or we can have a government that's for the people, by the people, and serves the people. And that's my focus.
When you were growing up in Ellensburg, were you a politically minded family? Was there interesting discussions at Thanksgiving around the table that made you interested and made you think that maybe down the road this would be something for you?
Yeah, no doubt. And it wasn't just Thanksgiving. I mean, if you wanted to get a word in at the dinner table, you better have an understanding of what's going on in our community. And you better be paying attention to world affairs. And that's the environment that I was raised in. I grew up the son of a police chief and a mother on the Ellensburg City Council. And so we were active in the community, and I think that's part of what fostered a desire to run for office for me.
The idea of not taking part, of not voting, of not caring, of not watching current events, of not staying up on what's going on in your own community. How did this become normal behavior in America?
Well, look, I think it's easy to become disenfranchised with our political system. We have a political system that really has devolved into tribalism, where both sides are trying to defeat one another and not the problem. We have focused on building a government that benefits really, really rich people, and I think that that's a problem. It's easy to become disadvantaged, and I think engaging people civically again is going to be the path towards rebuilding the country that we all know we want.
There's this concept that we hear on cable news often again, that we are a nation of laws. It's easy to say. Well, we have a lot of laws. We don't like to obey them. That's sort of part of our nature. We don't like to be reminded of them. We don't like to be judged by them. And we don't want to be inconvenienced by them. So this nation of laws, do we really appreciate what they do for us, or are we straining at the bit?
You know, I think the rule of law is under attack from the highest levels of government, more so than it probably ever has been. And that is of great concern to me because we are a nation that is founded on laws for very good reason. Our founding fathers were incredibly intelligent in how they built our Constitution and how they built a country not adherent to an individual or a family, but to a set of core values, which is the basis upon which we create laws. I have spent a career at the intersection of law and policy and focused on protecting the community as a criminal prosecutor and protecting workers as a labor and employment lawyer. And I think there's an opportunity to get back to a focus in this country around respecting the rule of law and crafting good laws that help people.
You went away to school. You were a good student. You went to a good university. You can talk about that if you want, what your life was like at university and at law school. But what brought you back to Washington? Were you ever tempted to just set up shop in Omaha or Des Moines?
Right. You know, so I went to the University of Washington for undergrad. That was my first trip to live over the mountains. I grew up in Ellensburg, and then I went to school at UW. And then I went to work for Congressman Rick Larson in the 2nd District between undergraduate and law school.
What did you do for him?
I worked on his reelection campaign. It was in 2006. Congressman Larson sat at the time on the House Armed Services Committee and on the Agriculture Committee, and we were at war, and the Farm Bill was up. And it was a pretty important time in our country. It set the groundwork for what ultimately became the 2008 election of President Obama, and that was my introduction to congressional politics. But then I went to law school out in Chicago, and it's funny, I didn't even stay for graduation. I literally
I'm out of here.
I did. I took my last class, took my last final, and left the next day, and was on my way back to serve as a criminal prosecutor for King County.
So the deep dish pizza was just not enough to keep you there on whatever side of town you were living on.
You know, fantastic benefit of Chicago, but
not enough to stay in town.
Not enough to build a career there. This is home for me.
And they don't call it the Windy City because it's just nice and sunny every day. Keep that in mind.
You know, and the funny thing about the wind out there, which differs from the wind I grew up used to,
it sure does,
is that it's windy, but it's like negative 10 degrees.
It goes right through you.
No doubt.
You have to wear long underwear in summertime at some baseball games.
Yes. And there's no period of time of temperate climates. You're either sweating or you're freezing.
Now, there are issues that face anybody running for office. Some of them I know are pet projects of yours, but some actually get dumped on you and become part of the election. What issues do you want to focus on?
You know, look, I think part of what I mentioned about rebuilding the middle class is a central focus. We've been, I think, under this experiment of concentrating wealth at the top of our country and pretending that somehow that helps people, and it doesn't. I think we need to refocus on rebuilding the middle class, and that means creating economic policies that build prosperity in this country from the middle out. I think health care is a major concern of people. I think that there's an opportunity to provide universal health care in this country if we do it right. And that means we're going to have to communicate with the other side. We're going to have to put good Democrats and good Republicans at the table in order to fix our health care system so that it works for people. Because I want to be the last generation to hear stories about a mother who has to decide between paying her medical bill or paying her rent or getting her child to the doctor or putting gas in her car. I think those are problems that we can fix if we finally realize that we're going to need to participate together in order to create change in this country.
Change in this country. Well, we certainly are going through some changes in this country politically. That leaves us with some of the questions that we wonder about, and that is there's a lot. This political climate has brought a lot of people out for the first time into the game of politics. A lot of them are rookies. A lot of them are women. A lot of them are young. A lot of them are idealistic. And you must be aware of that tide of change that looks to be coming.
I think that's right. I think one thing that we saw in wake of the Trump administration is that we have seen a rise of activism in this country that we haven't seen in decades. And I think that's a good thing. I think the idea that more people are participating in our democracy is essential to democracy itself. And I think that the more people we can roll into being active and participate, the better. I think that truly the foundation of progress in this country is activism. And if we can harness that into the midterm elections, I think this country is going to be on the right direction again.
I can't imagine the people of the 8th District have dreams separate apart from all other Americans or all other Washingtonians, but in your campaign, what's become clear to you? What do they want?
Yeah, look, this is the most unique district in the state. But at its core, it's small-town, rural, working-class folks. And it's folks who are concerned about policies in this country that have disadvantaged them, that have made life harder for them. We have all seen the growth problem that's happening in Seattle, creating wealth. And in large part, we're in the shadow of that in this district. I think what people want is authenticity in politics. They want somebody who's going to go fight for them in Washington, D.C., who's actually going to work with the other side, and who's going to focus on policies that will actually make people's lives a little bit better.
Let's say you win. You go back to Washington. You're the new guy in town. What sort of preparation do you have to do not to get run over by the process? And then how clever do you have to be just to listen and figure out what to do?
Yeah, I think that there's this notion that a freshman member of Congress has to show up and sit in the back of the room and listen. And I don't buy that mantra at all. I think that there is room to get to work on day one. My very first focus in the United States Congress would be to pass an infrastructure bill that would help Washington State, that would help the 8th Congressional District, that would focus on roads and bridges, but also on renewable energy technology, updating our energy grid to make sure we're capturing the renewable energy we're producing here in the 8th, and also that expands broadband technology. So we've got 700,000 homes in this state that don't have access to the internet, and that's unacceptable to me in 2018. And so I plan to get to D.C. and go right to work. I think there's an opportunity to connect with people everywhere, and I've been clear about this from the very beginning. I will talk to anyone. I don't care if you're the most conservative member of Congress or the most liberal member of Congress. I'll talk to anybody who's willing to do things that are good for the American people and that are good for Washington State, because I've already got my sleeves rolled up and I'm ready to go to work.
One glimpse into the future happened yesterday. I was here at a conference, a roundtable that included the governor and a number of other politicians in town, talking about the broadband penetration in the state of Washington, where there are 6 million of us in the state. 5 million of us have the internet. 1 million of us don't. And those 1 million people without the internet could be in rural areas, but they're cut off from medical aid. They're cut off from financial success. They're cut off from communication of all sorts. They're cut off by the whim of the industry from everything that the other 5 million of us are enjoying without giving it much thought, and it prevents them from being part of a modern society. That's what the internet has become, or connectivity, broadband connectivity has become. And solving that's not going to be easy.
No, but it is essential to progress in this country. I mean, the idea that we're leaving out 1/7 of everybody in this country, and in Washington State in particular, is fundamentally wrong. We can do it with an investment in infrastructure. It's not particularly difficult. We just have to create the incentives to connect everybody, because that's where I think the future is. And if you're left behind, we've got a school in the 8th Congressional District that literally doesn't have access to the internet. That's absurd. That is absurd. I don't know how you can credibly argue that students aren't disadvantaged without access to broadband technology. And that's something I'm focused on fixing.
The people of the 8th District are far and wide. You seem to think that they're pretty much alike, and that could very well be true because of their rural roots. But do they see each other as rivals? You know what it's like to be on whichever side of the Cascade you're on. You assume that somebody on the other side is saying something nasty about you.
It's funny. I grew up, we called them 206ers where I grew up.
Oh, yes. I got you.
I think that the reality is we're more alike than I think people recognize. There's no question that there's an urban and a rural divide in this district, but it doesn't necessarily track the Cascade Mountains. And I think when you focus on listening to voters, then you see how alike we are. I launched our campaign with 30 town halls in 30 days. Because I think the role of a representative is to learn and listen and to use that information to ultimately help and lead in Congress. And so when I had the opportunity to travel through this district, as I do every single week, and actually listen to voters, I think I've realized, and I think people that I have had the privilege of talking to recognize that we all want the same thing.
Can a Republican win on the west side? Can a Democrat win on the east side? Who has to win when half of your constituents are on that side and half on this side? Does it make any difference who you are? Or does it make any difference what party you're in, not who you are?
I think it does to a certain extent, but we launched this campaign last July, And when we did it, I was pretty clear. It's less about Democrats and Republicans this time and a lot more about standing up for what's right. I do think that there is a heavier concentration of Republicans in central Washington and in the eastern portions of the district, and there's a bit heavier concentration of Democrats in the western portions of this district. But with that said, this district is a true swing district. It's a district that has never elected a Democrat to Congress before. However, it's a district that voted for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. And so I think what voters are looking for this time around is someone who understands them, who can connect with them, and who's authentic and is going to stand up for the right thing at every turn. I think people are tired of politicians going to Washington, D.C. and taking politically expedient positions to further themselves that is contrary to the interests of their district. I think if we can send somebody to Congress who is going to fight for working class people, we're going to be a heck of a lot better off. And that's how I've positioned my campaign, and it's what I've done my entire career.
Your 30 town halls in 30 days, that was a big deal, I'm sure, in your life. And did you come out of it saying, I've got some ideas that I didn't have before?
Yeah, no question. I think that's why we focused on doing it, because ultimately it's not about dictating to working people what's good for them, but I think it's about actually listening. We did 30 town halls in 30 days to kick off the campaign, and now we're doing 10 town halls in the last 10 weeks leading up to the primary to make sure that people understand where my commitment is and understand that I'm going to be here to fight for what is important to people in this district.
You've mentioned a couple of times the concept, which is now more of a concept than it is a reality in this country, of doing the right thing. Doing the right thing can be a very painful, sometimes destructive experience. Many people say, I didn't have any choice. I had to do the right thing. And what happened? Well, my life was ruined. Whistleblowers talk about that all the time.
Right.
So many of our politicians, and they don't necessarily represent me, they're from all over the country, are the most cowardly men that I can find anywhere. They won't say boo about anything. They won't say get off my shoe when you're standing on their toe. They won't say, they appear to be a senator or a representative with no opinion about anything. How did this happen?
Yeah, I think we've seen what is a great retreat of leadership with values in the United States Congress. I think there has to be a recognition that we send 435 Americans to the United States Congress every year to literally make life and death decisions on behalf of the American public. And if we're sending people who forget why they're there, if we're sending people to Congress who are more interested in keeping their job than standing up for what's right, it's time to replace those people. I think that there's an opportunity to send people to Congress who view leadership as a higher loyalty, as an obligation, an ethical obligation, a fundamental value to stand up for what's right. And that means it's going to be tough on sometimes. It's going to be you're going to get some bruises. You're going to, on occasion, lose an election because you took a position that is the right position to take but may be unpopular. And that's how I view leadership. I look at this as an opportunity to serve and nothing more. And if I can get there, that's how I'll lead.
He's the candidate for the U.S. Congress 8th District right here in your state of Washington, Jason Rittereiser. Mr. Rittereiser, would you please ask the voters for their vote?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity. This is an important election, and it's going to help dictate where our country heads in the future. And I would be honored to earn your support. You can visit us at jasonrittereiser.com, and I hope to earn your vote. Thank you so much.
Last question. Are you glad you've done this?
Without a doubt. I am excited every day about the prospect of creating change in our country and